right there. Okie doke.
Cool. Hey, we're here
Yeah. Good
yet
morning and
again.
happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you.
It is
Or
definitely.
or or yeah, I was gonna say, or real soon anyway.
Yeah, you got any plans?
Oh, we got big plans.
Are you staying
Today,
behind?
no, today I'm finishing the last song of my musical. So I'm super excited about that. Got the second to last one done. Thank you.
Congratulations. Congratulations.
Finished the second to last one kind of late last night. So today is, as soon as you and I finish, I'm going to be sitting at that piano and writing the last one. And so that was my big goal for 2022, is to get the musical done. And I feel really good about everything. And then I have some time I need to get that done as quickly as I can. Usually it takes me between like 3 and 6 hours to write one of those songs. And this one's a duet between two characters that really are having an intense conversation. And I need to accomplish a lot in it. We're introducing one of the characters, and you need to fall in love with him very quickly, because he becomes very important. And he can be sort of acerbic. He's sort of a sharp-tongued, quick-witted antagonist, but we need to see his good side. We need to fall in love with his good side. And the female character is trying to convince him to help her escape. So there's a lot going on in the song. So it's going to be complex. And then of course, writing both parts back and forth and thinking about the way voices work and everything. So that's going to be a bit of work. So that one may take me a while. And then I have a ritual that I do every year at New Year's, where I take a day. Yeah. Today, I think I've told you about that. Today, I'm going to journal. I'll go through like all the pictures that I've taken for the year, scroll through conversations that I've had, and really think about the whole year. And I'll write down first all of the things that I need to let go of, things that it doesn't serve me to hang on to them, because, the times change, obviously. And so I write that down first. And then the second thing that I write down is all the things that I'm thankful for that have happened. The things that I planned on, like finishing this musical, and then the things that came to me as a surprise, just hidden blessings that I never saw coming. And then the last thing that I write down is all the things I want to be open to in the new year. So it's sort of my version of New Year's resolutions, only as opposed to, making these goals of, well, I'm going to do better at this, I'm going to lose 20 pounds or whatever. I always write, here are the things that I'm open to based on what didn't go well last year and what did go well. Here's what I want to open myself up to, and where I want to put my energy in the new year. And so I'll journal all that. And then tonight we're going to a huge dance and fireworks. So that's going to be fun, at the 80s club. So go do some bunch of 80s dancing in a tuxedo. Yeah, that's going to be a blast. And then tomorrow, morning, I'm doing one of those polar plunge things where you jump in the river and start the year off right. And then I'm going to take a massive dose of mushrooms, and I'll be going through my journal and meditating on everything that I wrote down, letting go of the old, being thankful for what happened great, and being open to new stuff. So that'll be about a 6-hour process tomorrow.
We have to cut that part out because I don't think it's legal, darn it.
It is not illegal to talk about it. There's all the podcasts
to talk about. I like that.
All the podcasts in the world that I listen to are completely okay talking about. So
that's good.
I could be, you know what? You don't have any idea. I could be eating, shiitake mushrooms, lion's mane mushrooms.
I hear all about it from my stepdaughter. So
I bet you
been
do.
there, never done that, but it always sounds interesting. And of course, she lives such a graphical reality. When she does something that alters her perceptions, she lives it and breathes it as an alternate reality, and she'll see whatever she sees, and it will be just as real can be to her. So
yeah, absolutely. It's a very unique
experience. Not real, right? I mean, where does reality stop, and where does so.
Well, and it's just, for me, the way that I've come to look at it is, if you think about the amount of information your brain takes in throughout every moment of every day. So you can take in 7 bits of information. Like if you think about your brain like a computer, you're a computer guy. You think about your brain like a computer, it takes in 7 bits of information, every 16th of a second.
Yeah.
So 16 times 7 every second, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, 24 hours in a day. And all of that goes in, all of it. And it doesn't leave. It all stays there. But what your brain does is, like when you sleep, basically, and when you go into deep states of relaxation or just even being quiet and bored, it files things away. And it's like, well, that's probably not important. Take the temperature today and stick it in the unimportant file, because you don't need to remember what the temperature was.
Yeah.
Which is why some memories, you're like, why do I remember this one thing so vividly and can't remember this other thing? Well, it's because your brain stuck it in a file that said unimportant. And so what it basically allows you to do is when you go in with that intention, it allows you to open all of those files again and say, what is all the stuff that I don't remember that I know? What are all the things I've experienced that could help me make a new decision or help me come up with a new creative pursuit, or whatever the case may be, whatever your intention is. It just opens the floodgates of capacity, because there's so much up there that you totally forgot you even knew. And I think that's why guys like Steve Jobs, would take, like, either annually or semi-annually, they would take their big creatives and they would go lock themselves in a house, and they would have a big whiteboard and they would write down all the problems they're dealing with. And then they would write down all of the new things that they wanted to create. And then they would, eat a handful of mushrooms or whatever. And they would sit there and just brainstorm with all the capacity that they have open. And that's how a lot of times, a lot of creatives will say that that's where some pretty revolutionary ideas come from. And even like you and I were talking about last week, now they've gone back and found that a lot of the ceremonial flasks and casks of wine and things like that from religious ceremonies actually had whatever the regional type of hallucinogen was mixed into the wine. And so a lot of these altered states, a lot of the revelations that came to people came during a time when they were at some ceremony or they were doing some personal ceremony with this infused wine or this infused drink. So you have like the native populations in the desert Southwest with peyote. And there's so many. There's truffles, there's these odd little truffles. There's a lot of different things. South America, where they have those toads, where the slime on the back of the toad is a mind-altering substance. There's all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, once you get outside the rules, regulations, and strictures of civilization, then it opens up, and there's always something like that involved, because it allows the mind to get to a different place. And that's what they're trying to accomplish with the ceremony. They're trying to they want you out of your everyday life. They want you in a different place. So I think everybody uses them. So.
Well, I mean, gosh, even like last night, I had that I do a lot of meditative work, and I had tried the week before last to do a meditation with my girlfriend, the one that I've been seeing. And I had a hard time with the meditation because the environment was very different from what I was typically accustomed to. Mm-hmm. So there were more distractions. I couldn't get into my meditative state. And she said, why didn't you have a good meditation? And I said, well, I think my style of meditation is different from yours. And she said, well, why don't you take me through one of yours? And so literally just last night, I prepared the space like I meditate. And I use a type of audio called binaural audio. It's a left-right stereo. You're familiar. And there's sort of a process that I walk through, and the style of meditation that I do is transcendental meditation. Mm-hmm. So where you transcend and you go elsewhere. And we were talking about that last night and again this morning. And she said it's a lot like the altered state of mind that you get, when you do eat mushrooms or do something of that sort. Last night when we came out of the meditation, I'm going to use a swear word here, so if you need to bleep me out, let me know. But I said,
I bet our audience will accept it, darn it.
All right, deal. I said, did you take a little journey? And she said, wow, yeah, I did. I said, where did you go? She said, I don't know, but it sure wasn't fucking here.
I think
And
it's, I think that it's so the truth is
yeah,
that religion
yeah,
is just one way out of the body, and it's good to get out of your body every once in a while, and if you can do
yeah,
it with mushrooms, then more power to you. I hope it ends up
yeah.
being a beautiful experience, and
I
i
hope
i,
so.
I know I've heard before that you've
Yeah,
done it and that you've had some really good experiences out of it.
yeah.
I hate to say this, but I got altered for fun always when I was young, and never for enlightenment. So I listened to y'all, and I listened to my stepdaughter, who's gone on quite a journey of enlightenment that is just
Yeah,
amazing to watch. She's turned her whole life around,
yeah,
and I really, see there's value there. I don't know. I'm so happy with my life that I don't know
yeah,
if I'll ever go anywhere else. But it's good that people are doing it and getting to better places. And
yeah,
I think that somewhere in there, from what little I really understand, that the world is kind of turning more
yeah.
this way as well. And so I see the references all the time.
Well, down there by you, I mean, at UT right now, they're doing tremendous amounts of research with veterans with post-traumatic stress issues. And Johns Hopkins is putting a tremendous amount of research into psilocybin mushrooms and the effects on their data. Last time I read their studies, they were taking people with virtually incurable depression, suicidal depression,
Mm-hmm.
and their process was to, because on average, the experience, the mind altered state lasts about 6 hours. And their process in their research was to double dose 12 hours straight and take a person, and you just put them through 2 sessions, and they would sit with a therapist and talk about the things that bothered them, but they would do it in this altered state, with the idea being, like I was talking about before, all of your resources being available to you to help you, and they had a permanent success rate of 89% in the curing of massive clinical depression, like unparalleled success with one day, 12 hours of guided meditative therapy using psilocybin. And like when those stats came out, and it's Johns Hopkins, it's not
Yeah,
Bob's
yeah.
University. When those stats came out, they were like, oh my God, we have to study this. Think of how many people we could help, and think of the good that we could do. And then at UT down there in Austin, near you, they're doing MDMA studies, which is another mind altering substance,
Part of it.
another non-addictive mind altering substance, and they're doing the same thing, therapy while using the substance to allow all of the faculties of your mind to be able to heal whatever that mental health issue has manifested as. So and it's
I'm
been
sorry,
sex.
but 89% is an ungodly
Yeah, right.
right? I mean, how do you argue with something like that? So
Precisely. Yeah. That
uh,
was, I mean, I'm a huge believer. And even I was like, you got to be kidding me. 89%. But that was the success rate. And these people were just freaking cured. So it's pretty amazing stuff, man.
I flash back to talking to my dad while I was on acid one time for about 45 minutes, one of the toughest conversations I ever had. But that was just the way it was when I was a
Yeah.
youngster. It was on the edge of the 60s, and we had Timothy O'Leary, right, doing interesting things. But other than that, everybody was just dropping out and doing their own thing, and it was all
Yeah.
about really rebelling and getting
Yeah.
away from a society that at that point was very superficially oriented, right? It was all
Yeah.
about what it looked like, not about what it was. And
Yeah.
the
What
kids
what
back
year did
then,
you graduate high school?
73, I think it was. So
Gotcha.
it was,
Okay.
yeah, I was born in 56. So,
Yeah.
and so, I was, when I was hitting 16 to 20, which was the very influential age, there was just a lot of stuff that was going on. And of course, right past the end of the 60s, right? I'm just
Yeah.
past the standard baby boomer age. So,
Right, right. Interesting. So you were a young adult, like during the times of the runaway inflation and the gas shortages and whatnot, right?
yeah, I remember 20 some odd percent inflation and interest
Yeah,
rates that are crazy. I remember Jimmy Carter, who was a really smart individual who presided over the nation at a really bad time
Yeah.
and never got past that rap, right? And
Yeah, man, it's tough. I think so too.
and so I more than anything back then, I remember that I was more of the early 70s, just that uh, I don't want anything to do with corporations or governments because we were just getting past Watergate and the Vietnam War and all of that. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking of corporations as in fact there was all sorts of the standard film had the anti-hero Clint Eastwood and others, and the stories were all about corporations that were taking over the world.
Wow. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and that was the whole idea that corporations are going to rule everything one
Yeah.
day seemed pretty inevitable back then, and you just
Yeah.
wanted to get off and do your own thing and get away from it all. So it was not what I think of as a really constructive time for young people,
Right.
and so I'm really happy to see the things that are going on now and the sense of enlightenment that's starting to take effect and is
Mhm.
starting to make itself known amongst youngsters all over the place, and the focus that they have toward bettering the world, finding a better place to be, breaking free of the 9 to 5 routine
Yeah.
that we lived for when we were young, right? And
Right.
and
Wow.
just moving everything off in a direction that I ultimately think is going to be a healthier, better direction. If we can get there, I think it's gonna serve youngsters a lot better than
Yeah.
where we were in the past. And of course, the gotchas that if everything happens so fast and there's so much going on, that sorting it out is always the interesting
Oh
thing. So
man.
we'll see how it all
Yeah.
goes.
Oh, I was giving a talk at a local high school a little while back, and the vice principal had come to sit in on the talk. And afterward, we were just talking about the nature of education, and he was very dedicated to his job. I love seeing stuff like that. When I give talks in educational facilities, I have a tendency to see two kinds of people. I'll see educators who um, sort of had it as a fallback plan. They couldn't find a job, whatever they went to college for wasn't working out. And so they went and got, an education certification, and this was their backup. And they just, a lot of them that get into it that way just don't have the heart for, really fostering uh, success and inspiring youth, which is heartbreaking to see. And then there's guys like this guy who was just like all he ever wanted to do was be an educator and really help shape the lives of the youth. And so we're talking about, I asked him why he was the only administrator who came and sat in. And he said, if someone valued your opinion enough to bring you in to talk to the youth, I want to know what it is that you have to say. And so we ended on getting this whole conversation. And I said, what's your biggest challenge in education right now? And I thought he was going to say, well, teaching to these standardized tests, budget, issues, funding, things like that. And he said, the biggest challenge that I see today is that things are changing so quickly. We're trying to prepare students for a life we've never seen, for jobs that don't even exist yet, for a world that's being created as we speak, and we have no idea what it's going to look like. And man, that hit me hard.
Wow.
I was like, man, I didn't even think about it that way. By the time those kids graduate high school, the world will look different than it did when they started high school, because it happens that quickly.
And we're
So
still working off of textbooks that have been around for way too long.
yeah,
How are we
no
really
kidding.
preparing the kids?
Yeah,
The whole notion of school and the way that things are taught is probably time for some change. I know
oh
my
man,
my nephew was homeschooled,
yeah,
and he got through high school and got more out of it, and did
yeah,
better in a much shorter period of time than if he was actually in school. He only spent the last couple of years of school being homeschooled,
yeah,
and because of the pandemic, and he tells me he got a lot more out of him. Of course, he's back into standard schooling now in college, but he really enjoyed his period of homeschooling and got a lot of extra things out of it that you wouldn't ordinarily get if you're sitting in school. The only thing he missed was the socialization, and the socialization, of course, is extremely important for kids. But he was pretty self-sufficient character anyway. His dad raised him to be a thinker. So so he wasn't somebody that fit in everywhere, although he was great tennis player and all that. So he had a good set of friends, but so ultimately we'll see where it all goes. But I think all of it has to change. But then again, everything changes all the time anyway. So
well, there was I'm reading Meditations by Marcus Aurelius right now, and it's so fascinating to see something that was written in the days of Caesar, that you'd swear it was written today. I mean, if the names were changed, there'd be no reason whatsoever that you wouldn't believe that it was written last month, because the struggles of people are the same. The only thing that I always puzzle about is how quickly things change as far as technology. I was on a podcast not long ago where it's an interesting idea. We had my youngest sister, who's 12 years younger than myself, my middle sister, who's 4 years younger than myself, me, and then my mother. And what we were discussing between us as family members was how technology had changed during our lives and how it impacted. And it was fascinating to find that my mom went from listening to one side of her family had money, the other side did not. So one side of the family had television, the other side was still listening to radio programs, and so she was born in 56, and of course televisions were already around, but not everybody had them. And so she went from that to, when she's a nurse, she's like, I remember when they brought the first computer in, we had to start learning how to use computers at work, but we were still on paper files, and we had massive rooms of nothing but paper files for all of these patients to keep up with, And so, she had seen all of that. And then you think about our grandparents, from our parents to our grandparents, how rapidly, how long things were the same, how many generations things were just pretty much the same in the world. And then how rapidly it's changed in the last, I don't know, 50 years, whatever. But I wonder if, what kind of impact, like you mentioned earlier on, what does that do for youth now? Because everybody gets shaped, right, by the age that they grow up in. You were when you were 10 years old, when you started developing your own opinions and stuff, right? That was what, 1960, what'd you tell me you were born in?
56. So
yeah, so 60, right there. Gosh, 10 to 13 is 66 to 69 for you. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was
politics and civil rights and war and dude.
Music. Come on, music.
Dude, yeah.
Yeah, I was in there watching Elvis when I was a young kid, and I still remember going to see an Elvis movie when it first came out. And then, Mom and Dad called us in, and we got to see the Beatles show up on Ed Sullivan.
Wow.
Right? Got to see the first man. I mean, we got to see the first landing on the moon.
Yeah.
Right. So, and where Neil Armstrong puts his foot on the moon and says, one small step for man, one giant leap for man. Right. I saw that live. Right.
Yeah.
And then and then listening to the Beatles, I get introduced at whatever 11 or 12 to Grand Funk Railroad by my cousin as we set up in his room that has black lights and fluorescent paint that he splattered with a toothbrush, and listening to the Led Zeppelin and the Grand Funk Railroad, and going, compared to the Beatles that I listened to on my little AM radio, that was just mind blowing, right?
Golly, dude.
That was just the way things were back then. But here we are, very, very different. Back when I was a youngster, there was no cell phones, there was no computers, as you say. And now look at it, and since the advent of computers, things have really started to accelerate.
Well, and then you end up making your career at Dell Computer, for crying out loud.
Well, yeah, but I loved sci-fi when I was growing up, right? So to me, it was all a sci-fi world. To join that, I actually sold. I was trying to get into computers, and they were still so new. I ended up in cell phones instead.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And we were selling a cell phone that had a big unit in the trunk and had a single tower in the middle of town. It was $1 a minute to talk on, right? And I got
Wow.
busy selling that, and then cellular came along, and the first cell phones were $3,195 to have a 10 number
Man.
speed dialer and a big unit in the trunk and talk on, you know, an actual cellular cell phone. And
Wow.
from there, I got I went off and wrote for a few years, and then found out that what I liked to do, which was poetry, was never going to make me any money. And
Yeah.
I was so poor during that time that I had to learn how to fix my own computer, which I just used for writing, didn't use it for anything else.
Yeah.
And then somebody else had a problem that was a friend, and I said, you know, I think I can help you with that, and helped them fix theirs, and eventually taught myself how to fix computers, and
Yeah.
got into that whole world. Finally went to Dell, and spent 22 years there, and just loved, because it was such a sci-fi world to me. And
Yeah.
I'm busy, you know, helping expand that world and helping people understand that world. And I never had any problem. You know, the technical to me has always been
Yeah.
a joy and fun to explore. I've never, you know, the metaverse, right, that we're heading
Yeah.
into, absolutely, immediately got it, got the
Yeah.
concepts, got the
Yeah.
feel for it, and just started running that way because it was so exciting to see something that was new. You know, just like
Yeah.
at Dell, when they came to me and said, "There's this new thing that, you know, we've had one guy at Dell running it. There's this new thing called the internet, and we'd like to put together a sales team focused on the internet. And would you
Yeah.
be interested?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, that sounds great."
Awesome.
And I got to see the result of being on that cutting edge. So we hit the metaverse, and I'm just loving the idea of going out there to the cutting edge again, because it's something I'm familiar with. So
Yeah, that makes total sense. I found it interesting that you got so excited about it when the opportunity came up, but now it makes sense to me why. So if you were super into sci-fi when you were younger, what made you decide to write a fantasy series rather than a sci-fi series?
you know, I liked Lord of the Rings. I enjoyed that as much as I did
Okay.
Stranger in a Strange Land, and Asimov's Foundation, which was the you know, the epitome of sci-fi back then. Was the Foundation series was where it was.
Yeah.
He was just better at putting universes together, and that was an incredible sci-fi universe. But I
Yeah.
like Lord of the Rings just as much. I thoroughly enjoyed reading that. So I've always had some fantasy aspect that I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Um, and when I went to write the series, I kind of fell into it because I had been in love for about 10 years with the idea of Jack the Ripper
Yeah.
coming to Austin. And from there, you know, I started thinking, well, how would he really come? So because there was that newspaper report in the Austin American Statesman about the Ripper being in Texas. That's what actually got me started. And so
Mm.
I thought on that, and really came up with the name for the detective a long time ago. I thought if I ever do a detective, it's going to be Harmon Wade. And
Yeah.
then when I started putting together and started thinking, well, how would this really happen? It was, you know, he had to be a devil. He had to be something supernatural anyway.
Yeah.
And the devil, and I was thinking, you know, the Christian mythos is, which I grew up with and knew very well, the Catholic part of it anyway,
Yeah.
was so compelling as story material that I just had to go there. And so that's how it evolved into a story.
How cool. And how did you, speaking of, timelines and when we grew up, were were you the age of Harmon Waite when I mean, does it mirror your age and your experience in Austin, the timeline of the book?
I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, it'd be just about right. So think, let's
Huh.
see,
I always
56.
wondered why you wrote it during that time frame.
Yeah, he's in his early 30s, and I was in my early 30s in that time frame in Austin. So early mid
Wow.
30s, and that's when I was, you know, that's when I'd broken away from everything and had gone off to the mountain to ride, I called it, and lived in a little efficiency apartment, drove an old car, which was not, you know, that was different from what I was used to, because I was always successful in sales and always making money. And so
Yeah.
I went off to the mountain to ride, and spent half my day reading the classics, because, you know, got to figure if they've stuck around for a long time, there's a reason for it. And it turned out,
Yeah.
yeah, they're just rollicking good stories.
Like what? Give me an example of like one or two of the favorites that you read.
Oh, you know, Hemingway, right?
Yeah.
So, and just reading Hemingway, and I pretty much every type of classic that was out there. I'd read it. I think one of my favorites. So Moby Dick was a lot of fun. You had to wade through it, but it was a lot of fun. But one of my favorites was The Old Man and the Sea. That was just so good. And believe it or not, I think it was it David Mamet that wrote the one where with the guy with the club foot and the girl that took advantage of him. I can't remember.
I don't remember.
I mean, I even enjoyed, Nathaniel Hawthorne. I enjoyed all the David Copperfield, right? All the different writing styles and characters and authors. I'd try to absorb all of it because it all had value and it was all good stories. You just had to figure out how to read it properly. Yeah. And then you got to enjoy this fantastic story. So I don't think there was any one direction I went in there. I was exploring all of literature.
Yeah. How'd you find out all the, were you going to the library all the time, or did you buy a whole collection of classic books?
Yeah, I had probably 2,000 books in my house of every sort. And I still do. If you went back and looked, just like your shelf there, I've got shelves still sitting in the other room in there. So
yeah. I had to whittle down my collection. I had 11 boxes left when I was done cutting my collection in half.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, what's my criteria for books that I'm going to keep? And it's a collection of half of it is fiction, half of it's nonfiction. And then the other designation was I have to either really love it or really hate it. I need to every book over there is something I would recommend as either an example of what's great or an example of what not to do. That's the way that's all organized over there.
Yeah, and sometimes I have 2 or 3 copies of a book because I tend to give them away when I recommend them, right?
Oh man, I don't have any copies of all my favorite books because I give the fucking things away.
Well, you got it. Yeah, somebody's interested, you got to turn them on to it. So
yeah, exactly, man. My very favorite book that I've ever read now for the longest time, it was Wuthering Heights. I've read Wuthering Heights 4 times, I think, because it's my favorite example of classic literature. And then a few years back, I was just searching for new fiction that would really jazz me. And I got on Twitter and I said, hey, I have a lot of like-minded, geeky, creative friends that I've got floating around. I said, what's the best book that you've read in the last few years? Because I want to read that. And like 3 different people said one book. And I was like, that has to be it. And it's a book called Ava's Man, written by a professor named Rick Bragg. And it is a novel styled account of the life of his grandfather. So there's a biopic, I guess, if you will, but written in the form of a novel. And it literally replaced Wuthering Heights as my favorite novel I've ever read. Like, yeah, it's that good. And so I've given away so many of those, like, because, I'm like you, when I was in traveling sales, I was in my car all the time and I was like, man, what am I going to do with this time? And of course it was before, the internet. Wasn't before the internet, but we didn't have it on our cell phones. We didn't have smartphones that, would put audiobooks on there. So I was like, man, what am I going to do with all these freaking hours on the road? And so I started going to the library and I said, I'm going to make a goal of listening to every classic novel. Like I'm going to start with Charles Dickens and Mark Twain. And I want to read all of Dickens, all of Twain, and I went through a time period there of about, I don't know, 6 years. And I read what I think is probably a collection of every classic novel ever, by audiobook. And
it's funny that you say that because that was, as I got older, my eyes started going bad and I couldn't really read anymore. So I turned to audiobooks too.
Gotcha.
About 20 years ago. And that's been pretty much the medium that I've used to absorb books. And I was listening to them back then when they were still on tape. Right. I've got Charles.
Get a whole big plastic case full of, case full of 12 cases.
I think I've thrown them all away now, but are giving them away. But that's all I had was a bunch of those. I was going to say Charlton Heston doing The Old Man and the Sea was probably the best one that I ever heard. But they weren't all performed the same way that they are now. Right. You're in an area, sort of a golden age of performance audio. Where you're getting to not only put your performances out there in a really more of an actor styled manner, right? Where you're performing the same way you would on a movie or a TV show, but you're also getting to hear a lot of other people do that. And when audiobooks were going on back then, there wasn't the same performance orientation that there is now.
No.
And so I really got lucky to see and to find those books that had that performance. And I've always thought that it was, you know, the disadvantages you can't see it, the advantages that you can't see it, right? So you just have this voice carrying you off, and it's just as enjoyable as watching a great movie, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Imagination is filling in all the blanks, and the voice is carrying you along. And so I thoroughly, you know, my Harry Dresden books are because of James Marsters are some of the great experience, and I probably have listened to them 3 or 4 times at least. And my son grew up listening to audiobooks because I did, and he listens to them. He listens to Patricia Briggs and you know and the Harry Dresden series and some of the others like that, just over and over and over again. He just loves the audiobooks. So
oh man, yeah.
I think I've got
a cool job. I love it.
I have 11 or 1200 audiobooks now because I joined Audible back when it was just getting started, and I was I was grandfathered into their 2 books a month program. And it's $20 a month for 2 books, and I've just left it running all this time. So I'm always looking for new books too, right? And so I had
you got to check out Ava's, man. There are still people out there in the world today writing literature on the level of the classics. It exists. It still exists. So Steinbeck,
Ava's what?
Ava's man, Ava's man, AVA. Yeah, that's the wife is Ava. It's Ava's man. But the favorites that I found back then are Dickens. I'm absolutely in love with Dickens' style. Yeah, and then Steinbeck, of course. So,
well, you know, Dickens' style was made to be read, right? So he'd create his stories and read them at the gatherings with the women, all listening to him read.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's the way that he did. That's the way he, you know, developed his books, was to be read out loud. So
I had no idea. That makes so much sense to me. And I just, you know, between both Dickens and Steinbeck write in such a dark fashion. You know, it's exhilarating to me to look at the dark side of life, and that's what appeals. I mean, that's the way I write. And I got to tell you, we had the 2-minute warning a minute ago.
Yeah,
I got into a debate with a director this week, and I thought I wanted to share it with you.
Oh, cool.
Because I got hired to play a character in an animated film, and the character is an Assyrian merchant. It's a biblical film. It's a biblical animated film, and they said you're going to play this.
That's that. I saw the little piece you sent me on that.
So, the merchant in ancient Assyria, and we got into a debate because I did all the lines and I sent it to him, and he goes, "This guy's got a thick Middle Eastern accent. That's too much. People aren't going to take that." I was like, "He's Assyrian." He goes, "No, we just want you to do a British accent." I was like, "You don't have to Westernize everything. People can stomach the fact that there are other cultures in the world. Like, don't you want this to be factually, you know, historically accurate?" Like, I went back and I studied the accent. I wanted to get it right. He goes, "No, just do a British accent." I was mad.
Yeah, what you say, if you're the only character true to character, then you're going to stand out like a sore thumb when everybody else sounds British, darn it.
Exactly. Man, I guess we're out of town. I got
less than a minute, so here we go. Darn it, I'm just getting into it.
I know. I know. We got another one coming up in a couple of days. Happy New Year.